Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, July 13th. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The Navy is still working to put out a fire on board the USS Bonham Richard in the San Diego Bay. 23 sailors and 36 civilians have been treated for minor injuries, including smoke inhalation and heat stroke. You may have seen the smoke and you can smell it in the air across the county. Here's KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman.
More than 24 hours after this fire started, crews are still working to try and put it out. As you can see here behind me, federal fire crews and Navy fire crews are continuing to douse the USS Bonham Richard with water.
Right now, the priority is to fight the fire, get it out, so then we can take a complete assessment of the status.
Now, all the ship's crew has been accounted for since this fire started yesterday morning. Smoke has been pouring over Naval Base San Diego and into the surrounding communities. The Navy says there won't be a complete damage assessment until the fire is out.
The superstructure and the upper decks continue to burn and have sustained damage. The forward mast has collapsed, and the ship is listing. However, dewatering is in progress, and we're keeping a good balance between both.
Crews on the ground on San Diego Bay and now in the air are using helicopters hitting the ship with water.
For the last 24 hours, 400 sailors have been on board that ship to make sure that we make every effort to save that ship.
San Diego County officials are telling residents to assume the air quality near the ship is unhealthy, to limit their exposure and to stay indoors. The Navy says no ordnance or aircraft are on this amphibious assault ship, but there is 1 million gallons of fuel.
Absolutely a concern. But again, we're doing the mitigation and we're making sure that, again, the risk of that is low.
Right now, Navy officials say there are about 2 decks in between that fire and the fuel, something officials are continuing to closely monitor.
We go after and we plan for worst case all the time. We train to it, and we're going to make sure we don't get there.
The Navy says it still doesn't know how this fire got started. The ship was at Naval Base San Diego for some maintenance, but officials say the fire wasn't sparked by any crews doing work. Now, flames have spread throughout the ship, and there isn't a timeline for when this fire could be out. If you're coming down to this area, you'll notice that the ship is listing or tilting a little bit. Now, Navy officials tell us that isn't necessarily concerning, and it's just because of all the water that's been dumped onto that boat. Here at Naval Base San Diego, Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
And the Coast Guard put out this statement saying it is deploying a protective boom to guard against any potential environmental concerns. A 1 nautical mile safety zone has been established, as well as a temporary flight restriction zone. A former San Diego County Sheriff's deputy is being charged with second-degree murder in the shooting of an unarmed suspect who was running away. 23-year-old Deputy Aaron Russell is charged with shooting Nicholas Bills after he escaped from custody outside the downtown jail on May 1st. The district attorney says there is video of the shooting, but it won't be released because now it's evidence. Russell is being held on a $1 million bail. He'll make his first court appearance tomorrow. San Diego and the rest of California are beginning to close down once again as coronavirus cases across the state continue to rise. Today, county health officials announced 419 new cases and no additional deaths. But priorities surrounding who can get tested are changing. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler has the latest developments.
Governor Gavin Newsom says California will be using a dimmer switch to modify its reopening plans. During a noon press conference, Newsom announced that effective immediately and across the entire state, all indoor operations must stop at restaurants, wineries, movie theaters, zoos, museums, and a few other locations. The governor also said that bars must close all operations. In San Diego and the 29 other counties on the state's COVID-19 watch list, the restrictions will go even further. Gyms, places of worship, hair salons, barbershops, and malls must close their indoor operations by Wednesday morning. He said that the state's reopening plans were never meant to go in one direction, towards opening or closing businesses, but rather fluctuate depending on the course of the pandemic.
Not on open economy or off shut down, but a dimmer switch, looking at conditions throughout the nation's most populous state as they present themselves, as those trend lines become points of concern before they invariably become headlines.
Newsom gave no end date for the restrictions. In San Diego County, a shortage of test kits has led to long wait times for those who believe they've been exposed to COVID-19. On Monday, county officials announced that tests provided by the county would now be prioritized for healthcare workers, first responders, and essential workers, in addition to older adults and people living in nursing homes or long-term care facilities. Supervisor Nathan Fletcher said that San Diego's testing shortage is being caused by a breakdown in the global supply chain.
So in addition to reimposing some restrictions to try and slow the spread of COVID, we are also confronting the realities of challenges in our testing system based on both the increase in positive cases and global supply chain shortages that are impacting many jurisdictions throughout, that cause us to refocus our prioritization on testing moving forward.
The county announced 419 positive tests and a 6% positive rate. There are currently 467 people across the county hospitalized from COVID-19, with 159 people in the ICU. The county also announced a new partnership with the local genomics company Helix to boost testing. Officials said because of this partnership, it won't have to close testing sites due to a lack of supplies, but they still expect the number of tests to dip in the coming days. Max Rivlin-Adler, KPBS News.
The San Diego Unified School District will begin the new school year like it ended the last one, all online. KPBS education reporter Joe Hong spoke with a school board member about what this means for students and parents.
In a joint statement with Los Angeles Unified School District, San Diego Unified said rising infection rates and a lack of testing capacity have forced the district to keep its campuses closed when the school year starts in August.
Well, first of all, it's a disappointing decision because we know that our students need to be back in school.
Richard Barrera is the vice president of the San Diego Unified School Board.
The countries that we see schools reopening are countries that have brought the virus under control. And the reality is, until we do that as a society, we're going to continue to be in this situation where schools are, having to figure out balance risks that we shouldn't be trying to balance.
The announcement from the state's two largest school districts said that a successful reopening of campuses requires not just lower case numbers, but also on-demand testing for students and staff.
If we could test on a regular basis all of our students and all of our staff and know who has the virus and be able to isolate those individuals, we would be in a different position, but we're not.
The district currently has no timeline for reopening campuses, but it has teamed up with public health experts at UC San Diego to develop specific thresholds that must be met before students can return to classrooms. In the meantime, it'll be more distance learning, but Barrera insists it will be better this time.
You're never going to hear from us that we're going to say that online can substitute for in-person learning. It can't, and it won't. But we can make online certainly a better, more robust experience than it was in the emergency in the spring, and it will be when we open August 31st.
Both teachers and parents will receive training on how to better participate in online learning. Also, students will be graded and be held more accountable for their work.
We have to have that accountability back in the system at all levels. Students have to be graded, teachers need to be accountable, principals need to be accountable, and the board and the administration needs to be accountable to student achievement.
Barrera said more details on the plan to reopen schools will be available on August 10th. Joe Hong, KPBS News.
Local law enforcement agencies continue to not punish those who are out in public without a face covering. That's despite the county-wide rule requiring them. KPBS reporter Claire Tregesser checked in with every local police department and has this report.
KPBS reporter visited Mission Beach and the Pacific Beach Boardwalk multiple times over the weekend and saw more than 100 people not wearing face coverings while walking on the sidewalks, riding bikes through the crowd, or waiting in line for a restaurant. Despite this, police remain reluctant to issue citations for violating the order. In June, San Diego Police Department officers issued just 3 citations, and the Metropolitan Transit Service issued 1, according to a KPBS review of police records. None of the other 13 police agencies in the county issued any citations in June. In May, only 3 citations were issued countywide. Police have said they are hesitant to issue citations because they worry about coming off as heavy-handed and damaging their already fragile relationship with the community. Also, they say the county's public health order is very difficult to enforce. The rule says people must wear a face covering when out in public and within 6 feet of another person who is not a member of their household.
It's real hard for us to know who's a member of the household and who's not a member of the household.
Lieutenant Sean Takeuchi is a spokesman for the San Diego Police Department.
I think generally people might envision families, right, where you've got a couple and you've got maybe kids, and those are quite simple. But it becomes a little difficult when it's not a family. When you've got the Pacific Beach area, where you've got several people that might be living together as roommates, and they're hanging out together. How do we as law enforcement officers are supposed to know that they're members of the same household? We don't.
He says officers sometimes stop people in big groups and ask, and if the people say yes, the officers take their word for it because they can't require people to carry IDs. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
In a statement, a spokeswoman for San Diego County says she understands the order is challenging for law enforcement, and that's why she hopes everyone will use common sense and wear a mask. After months of refusing, we saw President Trump wear a mask during a public event for the first time. He wore a face covering when he visited Walter Reed Medical Center on Saturday. The president said a trip to a hospital warranted covering his face, especially since he was visiting wounded service members. And President Trump insists he has a good relationship with his top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Yet, as Nadia Romero tells us, the Trump administration is citing examples where it says Fauci was wrong on the coronavirus response.
Tension between President Trump and Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Well, I think we are in a good place.
We're facing a serious problem now.
Becoming public.
Deaths are way down.
It's a false narrative to take comfort in a lower rate of death.
The White House attempting to discredit the doctor.
Dr. Fauci's a nice man, but he's made a lot of mistakes.
Despite the surge of coronavirus cases, the president and his top infectious disease expert not speaking.
Dr. Fauci is the most respected voice in the country on how we ought to be dealing with this pandemic. And to be trying to sideline him or diminish him or discredit him is just atrocious.
Instead, President Trump retweeting this message from a conservative supporter and a former game show host. Everyone is lying. The CDC, media, Democrats, our doctors, not all, but most, that we are told to trust. I think it's all about the election. A trio of polls released by CBS News show President Trump slipping in states hit hardest by the latest surge of coronavirus. In Florida, former Vice President Joe Biden leads President Trump by 6 points among likely voters. In Texas, it's Trump's 46% to Biden's 45%. And in Arizona, the two candidates are tied at 46%.
Fake news, phony polls.
The president's increased focus on Fauci.
I find him to be a very nice person. I don't always agree with him.
May be a shift in strategy, an attempt to win political points leading up to November. But Dr. Fauci warns partisan politics already impact public health.
If there wasn't such divisiveness, that we would have a more coordinated approach.
At the White House, I'm Nadia Romero.
The death of Rebecca Zahau in 2011 was recorded as a suicide when her body was found at the Spreckles Mansion in Coronado. Now her family is petitioning the San Diego County Medical Examiner to change her cause of death to homicide. The family is also filing a new lawsuit against the San Diego County Sheriff's Office for not allowing access to records of the investigation following her death. The family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Adam Shacknai, who was staying at the mansion at the time. In 2018, he was ordered to pay $5 million to Zahau's family. Today, Ventura County Sheriff's officials confirmed what had been feared. Actress Naya Rivera is dead. Search crews found her body in Lake Piru 5 days after the 33-year-old disappeared. Her young son was found asleep and alone on a rented pontoon boat on July 8th. Rivera was known for her role as a singing cheerleader on the TV show Glee. Two audits describe a history of poor financial oversight, misspent gift funds, and bad record-keeping at UC San Diego's Shiley Eye Institute. iNewsSource investigative reporter Brad Racino has more.
The Shiley Eye Institute broke ground in 1990 after Donald Shiley, an engineer and medical device inventor, along with his wife, Darlene Marcos Shiley, donated $1 million to UCSD to create a comprehensive eye care facility. Last year, physician scientists at the Shiley Eye Institute saw more than 100,000 patients and performed nearly 6,000 surgeries. But two UCSD audits, published 7 years apart, found fault with how the institute handled its spending, research awards, clinical oversight, inventory maintenance, training, and policies about staff activities outside of the office. A UCSD spokesperson said the university has fixed a portion of the problems identified in the latest audit, which was published in September. Dr. Robert Weinreb has run Shiley and UCSD's ophthalmology department since 2011. He did not respond to multiple requests for comment. Neither did Dr. David Brenner, the Vice Chancellor for UC San Diego Health Sciences. For KPBS, I am iNewsSource investigative reporter Brad Racino.
iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. We're learning more about one of the plans to drastically transform the Midway district. Today, the San Diego Loyals soccer team showed off its plan for a new temporary stadium. If chosen by the city, the soccer club would play in the 15,000-seat stadium for up to 10 years as it works to build a more permanent home. It's part of the Midway Sports and Entertainment proposal, one of two finalists for the site. Have you had enough of the heat wave? Well, if so, Mark Mancuso has some good news for you. Here is your forecast.
Well, it looks like the days of the intense heat are numbered as our onshore flow increases. So we'll see the return of clouds along the coast into some of the valleys, and the winds will start to pick up a little bit across the mountains and deserts as well. Temperatures will wind up fairly seasonable here over the next few days, maybe a few places slightly below average, and then a little bit warmer and generally dry as we head into the weekend. So it looks like some nice weather ahead. Typical July weather. Forecast for tonight, clouds coming into the coast. Temperatures down to 64 in Oceanside, San Diego 67. El Cajon at 65, 55 in Ramona. Borrego Springs stays around 80. Campos around 50. Now for tomorrow, it's more of the same here. We're getting rid of the extreme heat, so even in the deserts, temperatures will be knocked down a few notches here. And we'll be waking up to some clouds, and then we'll see sunshine. Nice afternoon ahead. High 78 in Oceanside, 88 in El Cajon. Ramona's at 89, and Mount Laguna at 79. Checking ahead into Wednesday, well, we're still in a dry flow, so really no monsoonal moisture to speak of here. And of course, a little bit cooler right near the coast with the marine layer. Temperatures will be hovering in the mid to upper 70s next couple of days, cooling off just a smidgen before we warm it up a little bit towards the weekend. Interior sections here, clouds and sun the next couple of days. Temperatures holding in the mid 80s and then a little bit warmer. More sunshine by the weekend. Head to the mountains, the weather looks nice, mid upper 70s to near 80 degrees. And in the deserts, the heat comes down just a couple of notches and then a little bit warmer into the weekend. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
The Washington Redskins is dropping its franchise nickname and logo. The NFL team made the announcement today, but the new name may not be revealed until later. Washington's head coach told the Washington Post he and owner Daniel Snyder were looking for a new name that would honor Native Americans and the military. The decision came under pressure from corporate sponsors, including FedEx, which owns the naming rights to the team's stadium. Nike and Amazon also removed the team's merchandise from their online stores. The coronavirus pandemic's disproportionate impact on Black and Hispanic communities has highlighted long-existing health disparities. KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento digs into the history of how inequities developed. She speaks with Dr. Cheryl Anderson of UC San Diego Center for Excellence in Health Promotion and Equity.
San Diego's City Heights neighborhood is seeing a higher rate of coronavirus cases than the rest of the county. And it's the same story in Southeast San Diego. These communities that have higher rates of Black and Hispanic residents are where the nearly century-old and now illegal practice of redlining occurred. That's when a government-backed body marked maps of predominantly minority communities in red and labeled them a poor financial investment.
Black Americans being essentially by policy forced to stay in one part of a community, and white Americans being encouraged and supported in staying in another part of the community.
UC San Diego's Cheryl Anderson joined me outside the School of Public Health, where she's dean, to explain how this anti-Black policy led to the health disparities we're seeing today in Black and even Hispanic communities.
The start lines are different, and so you now have certain neighborhoods that by sheer structure and design don't get resources.
She says those disproportionate jumping off points became exacerbated over time.
And then you look up and you see outcomes, whether they be educational in nature or health in nature, and you say, oh, it must be that there's something wrong with Black people because Black people are having these poor outcomes. No, Black people were by policy forced into neighborhoods that were not developed, that were not invested in.
Give me a specific example of a lack of investment.
So you have a policy around housing that then settles people in a neighborhood where it is more likely to have tobacco and alcohol sold to you, where you are less likely to have green space and be physically active, where you are less likely to have access to grocery stores that allow you to nourish yourself in ways that are more adequate.
She says this goes back to zoning and planning decisions.
And then the chances of you developing high blood pressure, diabetes, lung disease are increased.
The center Anderson leads works with groups here in City Heights to provide better healthcare access. And it also established community gardens to provide healthier options for the area. But Anderson says that's just a small part of what needs to happen.
The real deal is when we take a justice approach, which is to really understand what is the barrier, what is the reason, what is the root cause for us seeing the outcomes that we're seeing, and removing those systemic barriers so that people can actually have, the ability to get to that better outcome.
I asked Anderson if there's anyone, anywhere, doing the work to counter these barriers. And she brought up the recent news that certain sports teams are rethinking their mascots that people have long pointed out are racist.
They're rethinking it because certain businesses are saying, we will not advertise, we will not support you if you continue to have this practice. And so I think what needs to happen is we need to think about this from a systems perspective. And we're all accountable. We all have a role here. And so when you see the power and the privilege beginning to listen and say, this is not okay, we have to figure out how it is that we're going to turn this around.
There might be some people out there, business owners or individuals, who have nothing to do with healthcare, who have nothing to do with providing resources for a community, who may think that they are exempt from having to take any action because they're not part of what created it and they're not part of the system that can directly fix it. But it sounds like with your mascots example, you're saying that's not the case.
If you are supporting a community practice that has racist historical origins, racism is not a deal breaker for you. So you may not be racist, you may not be practicing or engaging in a racist moment, but is racism a deal breaker for you? And if racism is a deal breaker for you, then the way you vote, where you spend your money, and how you exercise, your time and energy will somehow be engaged in trying to help us address this issue of racism.
Anderson is penning an op-ed on the actions an individual can take. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, a widespread surge. Coronavirus infections spike nationwide as new infection records are set. That's coming up at 7 right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And here's another look at our top stories. Governor Gavin Newsom is hitting the dimmer switch on reopening California. Those on the state's watch list, including San Diego, now have to close indoor operations at places of worship, gyms, malls, and salons. Today, county health officials announced 419 new cases and no new deaths from the coronavirus. Also, distance learning will continue indefinitely for San Diego Unified Schools. The districts made the announcement today, scaling back a plan to allow some in-person education this fall. San Diego Unified says it's due to rising infection rates and a lack of testing capacity. The academic year begins in late August. More than 24 hours later, the fire at the USS Bonham Richard continues to burn. Today, the Navy said a fire suppression system was inoperable when the fire broke out on Sunday. It was actually turned off for maintenance work. Nearly 60 people have been treated for heat exhaustion, smoke inhalation, and for minor injuries as well. As always, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.